Clear the observation aisle. Incoming delegate. The metallic command cracked through the air, punctuated by the scuttling retreat of a drone. The floor shimmered briefly, reacting to the biometric imprint of the Academy's administrative override. Mr. Cairo stepped forward, antlers brushing beneath the overhead conduit matrix, his angular form clothed in ceremonial silver boob robes that fluttered faintly with each stride. His presence alone stilled the shifting postures of the assembled students. Bipedal, quadrupedal, winged, no one adjusted their posture, no one dared speak. Not yet. Cairo's three-fingered hand rose, not as a greeting but as an enforcement of expectation. The last mutters evaporated. He walked with deliberate weight to the center platform, glancing once at the unassigned desk positioned at the back. Sketched, not with the glyphs of a known species, but with a cautionary identifier. Earth Class D0. A Deathworld designation, flagged with an amber-banded warning. He activated the ceiling-tiered heads-up array with a palm swipe. No flickers, no projected fanfare, just the locked data tile for a single student, Riven Merrick. Today, he began, his voice composed but edged with caution, you will witness what no curriculum here could prepare you for. His eyes moved across his students. Curlin, with the bone crest nodules that flexed under stress. Draxel, perpetually shifting his perch with mechanical tail balance. Omnek, seated upside down as his species preferred. Every species in the room came from stable, predictable homeworlds. Earth, by contrast, was considered volatile, even by military standards. The main entrance hissed. No footsteps echoed, only the subtle compression of weight against an adaptive floor. The humans called it a walk. Here it looked like a calculated threat assessment in motion. Riven Merrick entered without pausing. He wasn't armored, no badge, no tools, just a matte black uniform that bore an Earth insignia, a spiraling ridge formation overlaid with an archaic carbon chain structure. His build wasn't imposing by local standards, but he moved like someone used to navigating danger without asking it to announce itself. He stopped a few meters from the podium. His eyes didn't flinch from the students' stares. Instead, he scanned the room with a dispassionate ease that unnerved several species accustomed to scent-based emotional feedback. They smelled nothing from him. No fear, no anticipation. Cairo gestured toward the assigned desk, but Riven remained standing. His voice was calm, measured, and unembellished. I'm Riven, from Earth. I was told I'm here to observe and be observed. The statement hung, not because of shock, but because no one moved to respond. One student, a Krellian who filtered breath through 5 thoracic vents, let out a rapid exhale through all of them. Another, with crystalline appendages, blinked in layered syncopation. Cairo folded his hands, concealing a twitch in his dominant wrist. You are not required to address the class formally, but your clarity is appreciated. Riven didn't nod. He simply walked to his assigned desk and sat without looking back. The atmosphere of the room shifted, not as an emotional cue, but as a thermal one. Several species adjusted their skin filtration protocols. Others modulated posture. The presence of the human didn't just disturb the room's composition, it modified it. Cairo tapped the console behind him once. Let the record show that Earth-class participant Riven Merrick has arrived as scheduled. No deviations, no escorts, no requested concessions. A student at the far right raised a hand. His name was Lernick. Thin, aquamarine scales covered most of his face, and his ocular fronds adjusted angle as he spoke. Sir, is it true that Earth is classified below sustainability levels for long-term civilization? That it was originally marked for observation only due to biohazard variants? Cairo didn't answer directly. He walked toward the wall and removed a physical plaque encased in magnetic stasis. He held it up for all to see. Earth, he stated, is designated Black Class by the Interstellar Geostructure Authority. That means it contains variable death-inducing factors in water, land, air, fauna, and tectonics. In academic terms, its environment is considered non-consensual. Riven didn't look up. Another student, Jernel, a stocky quadruped male with hardened backplates, twitched his forelimbs. And they live there? Cairo answered, this time without hesitation. They don't just live there. They spread from there. Earth was the only Deathworld species to attend the Triennial Accord vote without diplomatic escort. Heads turned back to the quiet human. Riven was reviewing a tablet with unreadable diagrams. Not a glance toward them. Not a single motion wasted. Let us begin, Cairo said, switching the floor bands to neutral hue. Our topic today was meant to be galactic trade evolution, but I believe we have something more vital to examine now. Interpretive bias in xenocultural classification. Students murmured, but cautiously. Cairo let the words settle. Then, sharply, he addressed the class again. For those of you who think Earth's designation makes its inhabitants primal, remember, they reached orbital capacity with no outside contact. They discovered nuclear thresholds before they could map their full oceanic trenches. They built space-based infrastructure while still battling atmospheric instability. We've all reviewed the data, but we haven't understood it. And now, you must try. The data pads in front of the students updated in synchronized sequence, but none of them opened the material. Instead, every gaze drifted back to the human seated near the back. Riven looked up. I don't mind questions, he said, tone flat. But don't ask me to explain fear. We don't romanticize that. We mitigate it. The desk lights adjusted in hue. The system recognized the beginning of an unscheduled discourse. Cairo's gaze remained locked on the class. Very well. You may proceed with inquiry protocol. But remember, Earth answers without embellishment. That doesn't make the answers easier to accept. Riven leaned forward. Just don't expect comfort. That's a resource Earth doesn't mass produce. As the room adjusted to this new dynamic, one of the students leaned slightly toward his companion, voice pitched low. This might be more than an academic exchange. From the back, Riven's voice cut in, unmistakably clear. It already is. Is it true you lived among things that hunted you for sport? The voice belonged to Dren, a translucent-shelled Corellian whose thoracic organs quivered at each inflection. His question landed hard, not because of tone, but because of how far it overreached the Academy's typical decorum. Across the room, several students froze mid-note, a few retracting appendages into instinctive postures. Mr. Cairo didn't rebuke the breach. He watched Riven Merrick, seated at the edge of the tiered benches, as he slowly turned his head toward the speaker. Riven blinked once. Define sport, he said evenly, without nourishment, without territory, just action, for the thrill of it. Yes, Riven answered. That's accurate. The murmur that followed wasn't loud, but it carried friction. Mr. Cairo tapped a command into the side rail. The heads-up panels flickered, then loaded a topographical readout. Rotating views of Earth's ecosystems overlaid with color-coded threat zones, peaks riddled with volcanic instability, forests home to venomous predators, coral bays where temperature spikes triggered chain deaths. Riven didn't glance at the visuals. He didn't need to. Let's simplify, he said, rising to his feet. What do you know of apex species? A lanky student from the Trivarith colony. Their species evolved on a moisture-locked oceanic shelf, raised a trembling appendage. Top of the chain. Predator, with no natural enemies. Riven shook his head. Wrong. That's a diagram. Earth doesn't function on pyramids. We don't have one apex. We have contenders. The list changes by region, by time of year, sometimes by the weather. What dominates in dry heat dies in cold. What rules the sea suffocates on land. Our threats rotate. He stepped forward, letting the panels behind him display the shifting biospheres. A pulse of desert sandstorms gave way to tundra. The frame shifted to show deep rainforest paths that shimmered under bioluminescent fungal growths. We evolved in pockets, he continued. Each pocket tried to kill us in a different way. Dren spoke again, barely above a whisper. And you remained? We adapted, Riven replied, scanning the room. We didn't tame every threat. Some we avoided, Others we outpaced. When none of that worked, we endured through numbers. A male from the Thoraxi line, a photophobic race with wide reflective irises, twitched his ears. And when you couldn't run, we made tools. Sometimes we failed. Sometimes we learned the hard way that predators don't negotiate. One student leaned in, arms tight across his chest. Did your young have to fight too? Riven's gaze snapped toward him. Not fight, survive. There's a difference. Mr. Cairo gestured toward the board again. According to Earth's surface records, over 70% of its largest non-sentient fauna are carnivorous or territorial. That's a conservative figure, Riven added. Some species blend their attack with terrain, camouflage hunters, poisoners. Others don't announce presence at all. You only know they exist after contact. Vren's thoracic membranes convulsed again. How did your species remain cohesive? We didn't, Riven answered flatly. Not always. Earth separated us. Mountains, rivers, deserts. We became fractured, shaped by environment before contact shaped us as a whole. By the time we built global communication, we'd already evolved cultural variations based on which death patterns we survived most often. Jernell, seated at the edge of the discussion circle, tapped a claw against his notepad. You learned from it? No, Riven corrected. We were forced to understand it. Learning implies distance. Earth closes that space without permission. A projection updated midstream, a thermal scan of Earth's jungle predators with heat-laced kill zones highlighted. One creature lunged from foliage, vanishing as quickly as it struck. No dramatic sound. Just disappearance. Threx grunted, eyes narrowing. That thing, does it attack in groups? Rarely, Riven said. Which makes it worse. If you're ambushed, it means you weren't the slowest, you were the most exposed. The class leaned forward in a synchronized, unconscious drift. Their instincts, bred in predictable worlds, struggled with a planet that didn't favor pattern or stability. Mr. Cairo interjected, voice sharper than usual. And your cities? Surely they offer insulation? Riven didn't laugh. Cities just compress the threats. We replaced claws with combustion, teeth with steel. Cairo's expression tightened. Do you mean your own inventions became your dangers? Some of the worst, Riven admitted. A predator wants a meal. A human mistake can erase thousands, or leave damage that waits generations to show its effects. Lernek, seated 2 rows above, swallowed. Why didn't your people leave? Riven turned toward him, the question clearly one he'd heard before. There's nowhere else to go. Earth wasn't a choice. It was the mold. He paused, walking toward the visual matrix as it displayed tectonic fractures along Earth's surface. Every movement of ground could be the last one. Every breath in the wrong area could carry pathogens that don't register until tissue necrosis sets in. And yet, we grew. Threx's claws scraped his bench. You call that growth? It's not the same as peace, Riven replied. But it's movement, and movement is survival. Cairo nodded, processing. So then Earth teaches through pain? It teaches through exposure, Riven answered. No safety rails. No curated ecosystems. No training wheels. You walk, you fall, you walk again. If you're able. Omnic tilted his crystalline skull. And if not, Riven didn't flinch. Then you become part of the lesson. The heads-up interface faded as the discussion reached its program time limit, but no one reached for their materials. No one spoke. Riven walked back to his seat, brushing a data panel to sleep. He paused, looking at Cairo. You asked for explanation, he said. I gave observation. You want reason? Reason doesn't matter to the ones that come for your throat without warning. Cairo gave a slight incline of his head. Noted. Riven's final words before taking his seat cut through the tightening air. Earth doesn't recognize apexes, only contenders. And we never got to sit out the tournament. Get to the line, Merrick. Let's see if your world builds more than myth. Instructor Kavix's voice landed like gravel dumped on steel. deliberate and stripped of inflection. The gym's air held a dry sharpness, filtered through cooling grids embedded in the walls. It carried the distinct bite of ionized resin and recycled perspiration, the kind that clung to the lungs rather than stung the skin. Rows of students stood shoulder-width apart, many adjusting grips on hydration nodes, some stretching tendons with practiced flicks. Everyone knew what this session meant. Gravity Day. Riven didn't respond immediately. He set his datapad aside, rose without fanfare, and walked toward the starting line. His footfalls triggered minor sensor pings across the track's edge, each sound soft but measured. Several students turned to observe him, eyes narrowing, not in ridicule but in calibrated caution. No one spoke. Kavax, towering even among the Ursidran, crossed his arms. His arms bore training coil scars and faded field tattoos, signs of someone who'd coached across 4 colonies. He gestured at the overhead panel. A countdown began, not digital, but mechanical. Each unit sliding into the next with a soft locking thud. A red beam scanned the floor beneath the runners, calibrating gravitational loads across their respective lanes. Standard challenge, Kavax growled. 1 rotation around the pressure rail, elevated G-force, no gliders, no augment loops. Run it like Earth taught you something. One of the avian species, Zavrek, whispered to his benchmate, talons flexing involuntarily. He hasn't stretched. The reply came in a low hum of membrane flutter. Doesn't seem concerned. Kavax snapped a knuckle against the activation post. Start. The field pulsed to life. A weight settled over the runners like a downward shove from invisible scaffolds. The floor grew denser. Students shifted, adjusting for the pressure in their knees and hips. Riven moved. It wasn't a sprint. It wasn't even athletic. It looked like walking through reduced resistance. Every stride extended slightly further than the last. His balance didn't teeter. His frame didn't sway. Others began to fall behind. Journal's limbs stiffened as his weight regulation suit overcompensated. Journal stumbled before the halfway turn, his hoof steps losing sync. One of the aquatic-born students tripped outright, momentum folding him sideways. The track wasn't slick, yet several figures skidded underfoot. Riven continued. Kavax tapped his display, eyes narrowing. The tracking beacon stuttered for a split second. Riven had reached the segment faster than expected. The instructor didn't show surprise, but he adjusted the readout again as if the data might correct itself. Threx, stationed near the final bend, inhaled. He's not even winded. No answer came. The tension in the room was kinetic, locked behind the walls of disbelief. Riven completed the rotation. He didn't stop abruptly. He decelerated in a gradual arc, turned his shoulders, and walked back toward Kavax. The final sensor buzzed as he passed, triggering the race's closure protocols. Lights on the upper rails dimmed, stopwatch reset. No celebration routine activated. No ranks flashed. Kavax didn't speak. He glanced once at the frozen stopwatch beside him, then powered it down manually. Riven raised an eyebrow. I was told this would be calibrated to simulate gravity. Earth's is higher. You finished before the recalibration protocol completed. Kavax's voice stayed flat, but his posture tightened. You moved faster than the algorithm could update the traction layer. From the back, Lernick muttered. That's not supposed to happen. Riven didn't respond. Other students began arriving at the finish, dragging limbs, clutching cores, massaging impact zones. The comparative gap stunned them more than the fatigue. Zavrek sat heavily on a floor mat, wings twitching. Did he train under double? Doesn't matter, Jernell rasped, panting. He looked like he was gliding. Drex approached, slow but focused. You're used to more pull, aren't you? Riven turned slightly, his expression unreadable. Where I'm from, the ground holds grudges. Mr. Kavax walked past the instructor's bench, picked up a kinetic baton, and held it against the track floor. It stuck. Not by magnet, by compression lock. He tugged once. The baton didn't budge. Not only did he run on a delayed field, Kavak said, addressing the room. He outpaced the density shift. That's the kind of strain that cracks femurs on some worlds. Ribbon didn't shrug. He simply inhaled through his nose, as if the effort had finally landed in his lungs. Then he walked to the side bench, retrieved a towel, and began dabbing his neck without expression. Rin finally broke the tension. How does that even feel, running like that? Riven looked over. Weightless. But we all felt the force, Lernick protested. I didn't say it lacked resistance. I said it didn't feel like gravity. You're carrying pressure, I'm shedding it. The room quieted. Not out of submission, but stunned recalibration. Mr. Kavix gestured toward the floor tiles. We recalibrate this track for visiting species every week. I've coached crystalline binders and jointless crawlers. No one's moved through it like that. Riven offered no retort. Kavak stepped closer. You don't sweat much. Riven held up his towel. We sweat when there's something new to endure. This wasn't unfamiliar. The instructor nodded once. Not a compliment, not dismissal, just acknowledgement. The kind exchanged between those who'd known exertion, long before others knew how to define it. Then, Kavax addressed the group. Next session, we reassess comparative load tolerance. Until then, adjust your expectations. The students slowly filed toward the locker wings. Few spoke. Those who did spoke quietly. Some glanced back at Riven. Most didn't know what to make of him anymore. Not because of what he'd said, but because of what he hadn't needed to say. Threx paused before leaving, looking once more toward the human. If that was you relaxed, what happens when you're under stress? Riven didn't smile. He picked up a hydration pack, unsealed it, and took a drink. Then he looked over. You learn fast in a world that never softens its grip. Get that med pack. Now. Left wall. Red handle. Third shelf. Riven's voice cut through the gym like pressure through brittle glass. Not loud. Not sharp. Just immovable. Kavax turned. Late. By the time the instructor caught up, the human had already dropped to one knee beside the collapsed thoraxy cadet. The alien's legs were twitching erratically, tail arced against the floor, chest plate vibrating at uneven intervals. The other students backed off, a few recoiling as if proximity might spread whatever had just snapped inside their peer. Cairo moved toward the observation deck, toggling the intercom. No override, let him proceed, Riven said, not looking up. Kavix approached slowly, the med kit already in his grasp, but paused a few steps away. His hesitation wasn't uncertainty, it was recognition. He'd seen this look before, in field personnel who didn't ask if a body could be saved. They just acted. Riven pressed 2 fingers against the cadet's thoracic ridge, feeling for movement behind the cartilage. The creature's breathing was irregular. Too shallow for thermoregulation, too fast for metabolic balance. He reached behind the cadet's cranial plate and toggled the neural dampener node embedded in the back ridge. No reset. Sweat had pooled beneath the cadet's elbow sockets, forming a line that curved unnaturally toward his neck. He was overheating. Core overload, tertiary system spike. Water lines ruptured, Rivern muttered. He's crashing. Jernell stood frozen, mouth slightly open, fingers twitching beside his leg. Zavrek kept shifting his stance without realizing it, eyes darting to the instructors, then back to the unmoving cadet. Kavix remained still. Hand me the syringe with the triple-marked band, Riven ordered, gesturing without breaking rhythm. This species can't process adrenaline. They need glutathione mixed with ion flare stabilizer. How do you, Kavix started. Standard exchange doc brief, Riven replied, already unsealing the dermal injector. Every academy rotation has a risk index folder. I read it, twice. He adjusted the cadet's limbs into the recovery position. Not textbook, not elegant, but effective. One leg bent, spine aligned, breathing path cleared. His fingers moved like clockwork, each step a learned pattern, not a guess. The sweat line expanded again. Riven reached under the cadet's jaw, felt the cooling duct constricting. He popped the seal at the base of the neck and injected the stabilizer through the auxiliary transfer membrane. The cadet twitched once, then exhaled hard. Not stable, but responsive. The breathing monitor embedded in the wall lit up. The indicator jumped, then plateaued. No spike. No alarms, just rhythm. Two instructors stepped forward but stopped as Riven raised a palm. He'll spasm once more. That's normal. The ducts will vent once the spike flushes. Seconds passed. The spasm came. Violent, sharp, full body. Riven braced the torso gently, ensuring it didn't torque sideways. The moment passed. The cadet began breathing in long, spaced intervals. Riven finally looked up. "You can take over now. Keep his torso elevated." Kabak stepped in, not quickly, not proudly, just with deliberate motion. "I'll call the med unit for evac," one of the assistants offered. "No need," Riven said. "He just needs fluid regulation and rest. The reaction's done. You bring a full crew, they'll delay treatment asking for species clearance codes." Jernell took 2 steps forward, stopped, then tried again. "Why did no one else move?" Zaverick looked around. "We all thought it was species-specific, didn't want to cause damage. You all waited for protocol." "That's not failure," Riven said. "But protocol doesn't breathe for you when airways collapse." Keto approached, datapad still in hand. "Where did you learn triage?" Riven stood up, cracked a knuckle, then flexed his hand once before responding. "Standard response training. Earth schools cover basics before secondary education. Earth doesn't wait for paramedics, not where I grew up." Kavax looked down at the stabilized student. "You didn't hesitate." "There's a window," Riven said. "Body begins losing information after the 3rd breath disruption. That window doesn't care what species you are." Cairo examined the sweat lines still visible on the floor. "You saw that first? The Raxi cool through radial venting swept that close to the spine means the internal loop is failing." "None of us caught that," Kavax admitted. "You weren't trained to look," Riven replied without bite. "But now you will." Zavrek knelt beside the recovering cadet. "Will he remember any of it?" "Probably the pain before collapse," Riven answered. "Maybe the aftermath, nothing in between." Threx appeared at the far wall, arms crossed. He hadn't spoken since the gym session. He pointed toward Riven. "That wasn't just fast, that was detached. You didn't flinch. Emotion comes later. If it shows up during, people bleed longer." Cairo nodded. "You didn't treat him like a hazard." "He wasn't. He was just in trouble." Riven began gathering the used medical implements, locking each one in the disposal case. He wiped the floor once with a sealant patch, activating the bacteria shield that would keep others from slipping on the residue. Each movement was intentional, practiced, expected. When he finished, he handed the kit back to Kavax and returned to his seat. "You could have waited for our response," Cairo said, more an observation than a criticism. "I'm not wired for waiting." The instructors didn't challenge that. In the far corner, the overhead panel blinked. The cadets' vitals had returned to baseline. Kavax finally allowed himself a full breath. "He'll walk out." "That was the point," Riven replied. Thrax watched him leave the floor, then turned to Kavax. "Do all humans train like that?" Kavax shook his head. "No. Only the ones that know what it means when nobody else moves." "Why did your species wage war against itself?" Threx's voice dropped flat as he rotated the brittle remains of a flag fragment between clawed fingers. "This was your own symbol, and you burned it." The table in the Academy library was wide and ancient, crafted from sun-hardened sapwood, imported from a peace harvest world. The scorched edge of the fabric Threx now examined didn't belong in that setting. Neither did the jagged lines across the fragment, where once unified stripes had been reduced to ash and soldered thread. Mr. Cairo didn't interrupt. He let the moment stand. The room's ambient light adjusted with the hour, casting narrow shadows along the table's edge. Heads-up displays across the curved wall flickered into segmented records. Recorded footage, thermal renderings, annotated debriefings. Riven Merrick sat unmoving, hands clasped in front of him. You're not asking about violence, he said. You're asking why logic allowed it. Paria flinched. He hadn't spoken yet during the session, his bioluminescent scale still dulled from the previous day's gym incident. We've had conflict, trade disputes, territorial errors, but we've never fractured our own species intentionally. You haven't had to share a planet with fire, ice, disease, drought, and competition all at once, Riven said. We didn't just evolve against nature, we evolved while arguing about how to do it. Lernick pulled up an archival document on his reader. The Pact's collapse. 32 nations. Nuclear fallout. Resource starvation. 8 years of no central authority. And that's considered your rebirth era? It was the last time we learned the same lesson at the same time, Riven answered. A lot of eras came before it where we learned different things, and forgot all of them. Dren, still seated beside the display, tapped an image. A burned city grid with satellite overlays of craters and structural remnants. You did this. To your own. No predator forced us into that. No invasion. Just our choices. Journal leaned forward. But why would you create weapons that could erase your own civilizations? Because we thought threats would come from the outside. When they came from within, we used what we built for defense against ourselves. Mr. Cairo tapped his own display. Let's not overlook that they rebuilt. There are 57 international cooperation alliances that emerged after the collapse. They built unity out of wreckage. Riven's expression didn't soften. Unity built on memory, not peace. We remember consequences. That's why we hold. Zavrek frowned. But why burn symbols? Why destroy your own identifiers? Because symbols aren't sacred, Riven replied. They're only as strong as the people who carry them. When people divide, symbols divide with them. That fragment Threx is holding, that wasn't just destroyed, it was rejected. Threx turned it over again, claws pausing at the charred seam. So, you start over with each war? Sometimes. Other times we drag the old ideals behind us, pretending they still work. Journal pulled up another image, a tree digitally rendering, each branch labeled with a different century of Earth conflict. The branches forked violently, whole sections blacked out by successive erasures. This doesn't look like evolution, it looks like recursion. That's accurate, Riven said. We're recursive learners. We spiral until something breaks. Burnek recoiled slightly. That's inefficient. Only if you have alternatives. Earth didn't provide any. We didn't evolve with guarantees, just possibilities. Mr. Cairo cleared his throat. You see how we study Earth students, not as a model, but as an anomaly. A species shaped by contradiction, yet functional. Threx tapped the flag once more. You functioned after collapse. What rebuilt you? Riven pointed to the data field. Coordination, not unity. We stopped trying to agree on everything. We started trying not to starve each other. Zavrek's wings quivered at that. That's the bar. On Earth, survival is the floor. Anything above it is earned. Cairo dimmed the displays slightly, letting the overhead draw more focus to the center. Let's talk about the Pact Reconstruction Code. Journal's eyes widened. The one that banned nation-states with standing militaries? Temporarily, Cairo replied. After Pax, humans tried limiting their own ability to escalate. It didn't last, but it redefined their engagement rules. Riven interjected. We learned to make conflict expensive. If it wasn't avoidable, we made sure everyone paid. Dren frowned. That's not peace. That's deterrence. It's what works, Riven said. Threx pushed the flag across the table. So, when peace can't hold, you force balance through cost. Earth's history punished arrogance. And generosity, Riven said. We learned balance by trial. Lernick looked up, tone sharpening. But your trials cost lives, billions, and taught billions more what not to repeat. Mr. Cairo stepped forward, placing a small cube at the center of the table. It activated with a tactile pulse, no lights, no projections, just warmth against the skin. This is an artifact from Earth's Pacific Coalition Tribunal, one of the last councils formed before the energy rationing era. They didn't agree on culture, or currency, or language, but they agreed on consequences. Riven nodded. That's what changed everything, not agreement. Agreement didn't hold, consequences did. Threx finally leaned back, claws resting beside the flag. So, Earth survived not because it learned harmony, but because it couldn't afford disharmony anymore. That's how we rebuilt, Riven said. Not on faith, on friction, with scaffolds built over old wounds. Journal shook his head, uncertain. Your history isn't reassuring. It's not meant to be, Riven said. It's meant to be understood. The cube's warmth faded. The table's displays blinked off. Cairo gathered the artifact and turned toward the door. Next lesson moves away from history, but remember this one. Understanding humanity isn't about admiration. It's about recognizing what happens when life writes over the same fault lines again and again. Riven stood slowly. You asked why we turned on each other. The better question is why we didn't stop sooner. He left the room without waiting for a reply, his teeth. And that's trust? Drex's voice dropped lower than usual as he stared at the paused frame on the heads-up display. The image held steady, a large canine jaws, open mid-snarl, teeth glistening, eyes locked not on prey but on the camera lens. It was unmistakably a threat posture, yet the footage timestamp marked it as part of a family archive. The creature had posed willingly. Riven tapped the console once. The image advanced. The animal's muscles eased. A human hand, bare, unprotected, reached into frame. The canine pressed its snout into the palm, exhaled once, then rested its chin atop the wrist. No restraint, no training collar, just response. Yes, Riven said. That's trust. Journal muttered under his breath. That's insanity. The classroom felt tighter than usual. It wasn't the temperature. Climate control kept things stable, but the psychological compression of what they were seeing defied species logic. Predators weren't allies. They were variables, risks, evolutionary markers to avoid, not engage. Yet here, in frame after frame, were examples of Earth's most lethal, non-sentient species engaging in gestures of mutual acceptance. Cairo stepped beside the main terminal. Today's lesson isn't about control, it's about coexistence and how humans redefined the concept. Drin folded two sets of arms. That thing could crush a skull. Riven nodded. It could. So could 100 others. Some were once adversaries, now they're companions. Parya looked nauseous. You invited danger into your homes. Not immediately, Riven said. It started as necessity. Wolves followed human hunting trails. We left bones. They left warning howls. We shared threat awareness. Over generations, the relationship deepened. Zavrek's feathers ruffled. And you weren't ever turned on? Betrayed? Of course, Riven said. But the data proved the risk paid off. Mutual defense, emotional support, search capabilities. We didn't just tolerate their presence. We structured partnerships. The next image snapped into view. A falcon perched atop a human shoulder, wings relaxed, gaze following a distant point off frame. Its talons, curved and lethal, rested near the jugular. That one was trained to scout avalanche paths, Riven said. He saved 24 climbers during a whiteout storm. Lernick exhaled sharply through his gill slits. You entrusted airborne kill beasts to spot for rescue ops? Bell can see heat signatures through layered snowfall better than some machines. Our bond with them isn't about hierarchy. It's about function. Journal pulled up a domestication timeline from the archive tile. Dogs, 20,000 years. Equines, 6,000. Elephants were never fully tamed? No, Riven confirmed. But we work with them. They remember kindness and cruelty. Threx tilted his head. Why take the chance? Because Earth doesn't reward isolation. We weren't the strongest, not the fastest, but we were the most persistent. He gestured toward the monitor. We formed alliances wherever we could, across species lines. A video loaded. A recorded rescue. A child trapped in rising floodwater. A Labrador plunged into the current, teeth gripping the jacket collar, dragging the boy back to the bank where human responders took over. No voice commands, no shock collars, just timing, instinct, understanding. Zavrek blinked. So they risked themselves? People didn't know they were risking, Riven replied. They only knew someone needed them. We cultivated that instinct, refined it, then respected it. Parya shifted uneasily. But some of these creatures still kill. Even now. Correct, Riven said. Domestication isn't sterilization. These aren't robots, they're living entities with choice. That's what makes the bond real. Cairo pulled a new image onto the display. This one featured a human soldier crouched behind cover during a battlefield extraction. A German shepherd lay beside him, bleeding, shielding the man's torso with its own frame. The animal refused to retreat, Cairo noted. Despite injury, it stayed in front of the fire vector. It knew the cost, Riven added, and it chose. Threx stared at the screen. His arms rested still for the first time since entering the room. I always thought humans survived because of your hostility. This... No, Riven said. This is why we endured. We didn't just resist enemies. We made allies, in places others wouldn't look. Lernick tilted his display. Did any other species try this? Not like we did, Riven said. Other worlds tamed livestock. We built kinship. We created culture around the concept. Symbolism. Burial rituals. Emotional transference. Grin interjected. Emotions. That's your term for instinctive care? No, Riven corrected. It's our term for chosen risk. We knew we could be harmed. We engaged anyway. The room held its breath, not from fear, but from adjustment. Understanding wasn't coming easily. It required reevaluating entire social models. Cairo dimmed the overhead displays and spoke quietly. Some believed humanity's capacity for warfare made them exceptional. They were wrong. It was this. Riven turned to Threx. You asked if we sweat under stress. The real answer is yes. But we also extend our hand when we know it might be bitten. Threx looked at the image of the dog again. Its eyes had locked with the camera, not out of challenge, but connection. And it doesn't bite, Threx said. Because it trusts? Because we earned it. You think danger defines us. It doesn't. We define danger. Riven's voice did not echo. The sound dampeners in the Academy's Hall of Deliberation absorbed every tonal fluctuation, preserving only the weight of what was said, not how loud it landed. He stood alone on the amphitheater's central tier. Tiered rows of alien students surrounded him, each species arranged by origin quadrant, each pair of eyes tracking his every movement. No flags, no banners, just a dimmed crest of the institution, rotating slowly above the stage. Behind him, a glass podium held nothing. No reader, no interface, no scripted feed. The heads-up display behind him showed one image, Earth. Rotating in low orbit, capture. Cloud-wrapped, storm-lit, scarred. He took another step forward. Your reports list Earth as high risk. Your archives refer to my home as incompatible with stable development. Your biology studies call us aberrant. Correction, initiated to his right. Not animated, not staged. It was an unfiltered satellite pass. Earth's continents glimmered with city clusters stitched between tectonic ridgelines. On one edge of the globe, smoke spiraled from an active volcano. On the opposite side, a hurricane churned in slow rotation. We call it home, Riven said. Not because it is easy, because it never promised to be. No one interrupted. You've studied our storms. You've questioned our carnivores. You've asked about our fractured past, our willingness to fight ourselves. But you didn't ask how we keep going after every failure. He gestured toward the display. Because Earth doesn't end when it wounds us, and neither do we. The globe began to shift. Layered overlays revealed seismic fault lines, flood zones, wildfire scars. Then, another shift. Cities rebuilt on lava beds. Coral regrowth along bleached reef chains. Bullet trains arcing over territory once reduced to rubble. We are not who we are because of what tried to end us. We are what we became after each attempt failed. Riven's throat flexed, breath catching once, just once, not out of hesitation, but something weightier. Every being in the hall logged that moment. Each time the ground split, we reinforced our foundations. Each time the sky collapsed, we changed our maps. When something burned, we asked ourselves if rebuilding it the same way made sense, or if we needed to adapt instead. He paused, allowing the screen to shift again. Not all of it was wise. Not every decision came from wisdom. Some were born of rage, some from despair. But the pattern was always the same. Make it count. The globe paused again, this time zoomed into a small child clutching a rescued animal outside a sheltered dome during a sandstorm. Wind whipped through the image. The child laughed. The animal licked dust from the boy's cheek. That's the part you haven't understood yet, Riven said. We don't fear hardship. We don't welcome it either. We respond. He took a step backward. You've mistaken our strength for threat, our scars for aggression. But what you've seen here is not the mark of a dangerous people. It's the mark of a people who learned never to let tragedy settle. The display shifted once more. Rows of Terran volunteers planting trees on a tundra restoration zone, lifting walls in a city half-flooded, threading cables over fault lines to reconnect isolated communities. We don't respond with perfection, but we respond with intention. Then he turned, gesturing to the only empty seat on the inner platform, left open as a symbolic gesture. It hadn't been filled during any prior session. No one had asked why. That chair was meant for the one who didn't survive the landslide on my home continent. He was going to speak today instead of me. A murmur rippled through the assembly, not emotional, just kinetic tension. I took his place, Riven said. Not because I'm better, but because I could carry his story. He looked out across the array of species before him. You speak of Deathworlders like we are built for violence, but the truth is simpler. Earth is not a world that allows comfort. It demands commitment, and we carry that demand with us wherever we go. He let the weight of that sentence stand. When we stretch our hands toward a storm beast and it doesn't bite. When we choose to build again, where lava once ran. When we bury our dead without surrendering our future. These aren't instincts. They're decisions. Riven stepped away from the center of the platform. His pace was steady, but his voice remained fixed in the air. Deathworlder. It's a term you gave us. We didn't ask for it, but if you use it knowing what it actually means. He faced the display one last time. Not conqueror, not brute, not predator. The globe shifted, locking into frame again. This time, it showed Earth not as a map, but as a heartbeat, infrared pulses measuring agricultural growth, energy output, sea traffic, living, changing, enduring. It means we come from a world that survives by learning, and so do we. He walked off the stage. No cue followed. No sounds filled the space. Not reverence, not approval, just presence. Your species doesn't conquer, the message began. It outlasts. The words blinked once in the corner of the heads-up display embedded into Riven's desk. The message tagged from Cairo's private channel. No sound, no fanfare. Just data, unwrapped in a square of compressed light tucked between course schedules and biome theory updates. Riven didn't touch it immediately. His attention lingered on something else. A claw-carved talonstone from a Drenvar student sat at the edge of his desk, polished and warm from being carried too long. Beneath it, a folded scrap of barkskin inscribed with markings that didn't translate into Galactic standard. It wasn't a message, It was a symbol, a cultural sign of respect used only during funerals. Another gift rested against the leg of his chair, a transport charm from the Tselith quadrant, wrapped in ribbon color to signify survival after orbital collapse. These were not offerings of apology. They were acknowledgments. He reached for none of them. Instead, he stood and scanned the hall. The last day at the academy hadn't been marked by ceremony. No assemblies, no banners, no formal goodbyes. It had started with fewer eyes on him, fewer questions in his inbox, fewer species trailing him through corridors. Not due to disinterest, but because they no longer looked at him with analysis. They looked like people seeing a peer for the first time. Riven left the classroom behind and moved into the central causeway, a spine of interconnected domes where species passed through on their way to biome studies, cultural ethics, and interstellar negotiation labs. Normally, the space buzzed with layered dialect, scent-driven greetings and emotional discharges projected from crystalline students. Today it held something else. He walked between benches sculpted for tentacled posture. Under hanging filtration vines meant for avian respiration, past dust-absorbent tiles designed for students from sand moons. Every aspect of the structure spoke of adaptation. Yet none of it had prepared for someone like him. In the hall's midsection, his path curved into a botanical atrium. At the center, a mural, recently updated, now bore a new quadrant. Small, stylized depictions of humanity's early disasters, painted in the geometric strokes favored by the Academy's artists. Floods, earthquakes, predatory encounters, social unrest. And above them, in gold filament, the phrase, "The storm forged the archive." He didn't stop to admire it. He had already seen it once that morning. He kept walking. The Crocian student, a serpine species with facial folds that change shade based on emotional balance, lowered his crest as Riven passed, a small, deliberate gesture in Crocian culture. Not submission, a declaration. "I have learned from you." At the stairwell, he noticed a fractured display once used for specimen tracking. Someone had repaired it, but left a missing edge unpatched. Below it, in black ink on transparent composite, a sentence had been added. "Pain is data, pain remembered is survival." He reached the top floor, where Cairo's study overlooked the central dome. The instructor was not present. Only a pulse left on the desk, a private memory shared across linked faculty channels. It opened to a still image of Riven speaking during the assembly. Not the full address, just the frame when his throat caught. No sound, no timestamp, just visual memory and metadata from over 60 species who had all bookmarked the same exact moment. At the bottom of the message, one line from Cairo remained. "Your world is harsh, but it taught you how to see." Riven exhaled, breath deep but measured. He left the study without response. Descending, he crossed a gathering of maintenance staff, who didn't look up, but they stepped aside, without cue, without debate. At the Academy's front vestibule, a tray had been placed on the side bench, filled with untouched food. Human food, Earth-standard nutritional paste, fruit compound, boiled grains. None of it opened. No note, just a gesture. A failed attempt, maybe, but it meant they'd tried. Before passing through the exit threshold, he looked back once, not at the building, but at the translator node he'd left on the panel beside his seat days ago. It was still there. No one had moved it. No one had dared. He walked past the boundary line and stepped onto the outbound lane toward the transit hub. Above him, transport shuttles aligned with Academy corridors, gliding into place for departure runs. They emitted faint traces of thermal transition. That heat touched his skin, not scorching, not dangerous, just present. Like Earth's sun filtered through thin atmosphere. He didn't squint. He let the warmth hit him. A student jogged toward him from behind. Young, reptilian, no words, just a single object in hand. A folded patch. Earth's crest, stitched onto Academy cloth. The symbol, distorted by fusion threading but recognizable. Riven took it, nodded once, and kept walking. At the base of the shuttle platform, his passage credentials flashed green. He boarded without turning. Inside, no ceremony greeted him. No voice welcomed him aboard, no automated script read out conditions. Only the cabin's atmosphere system activated, pressurizing air to Terran levels, not out of necessity, just out of recognition. He sat. The patch remained in his hand, edges warming against his palm. And then, finally, he said something. Barely audible. Not a proclamation, not a victory cry. Just words released into a space that no longer needed explanation. Debbie don't fear Earth anymore, they respect it. He looked forward, not to see where he was going, but because it was time to leave. The vessel ascended. There was no silence,